Have a sit down.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, I need your congregation to come in here, my friend.
Let's start with
I got a little something to say.
So Zoom people, there was I don't know if
I did.
knew.
I said
Okay.
they're gonna.
Yeah,
make
Larry
that joke.
is one of the main guys. He came in and said, "Hey, you need us to turn the music down." Yes, we do, Larry.
He also said if you need anything, he's right there.
Yeah, I
He
would.
said it like 6 times.
Yeah,
I will.
right? You see, because he was like, you need Jesus in your life. And I'm like, maybe I do.
Maybe you
he's
need
already
yoga
there.
in your life.
Oh, flip it.
I had a little altar moment last night. So I was trying to tell my husband what the mantra was for the meditation.
Uh-huh.
And I can only remember 2 out of the 3. The middle one I forgot.
The middle one.
I forgive myself for making mistakes.
I forgive myself. Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Thank you, Beth. For being imperfect, for making mistakes, for not letting go.
I think I fell asleep saying that.
That's the one. I think it was the maybe first virtual or second. I don't know, one of them. When we were doing it, maybe Fox or whatever. That's the one that I was talking about, the mantra or affirmation one, where I did it virtually when you guys had it up in the live streaming. And now every meditation, even the ones where you tell us the method, I'm doing that one.
Yeah.
It's the only one that works for me.
Yeah. It's cool.
Which one is that? The one that we did yesterday.
And forgiveness.
They had done it on the virtual thing pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear your voice, Chris. It kind of freaks me out.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Secretly. So that was randomly impromptu conversation. Any questions, comments, concerns about anything? Cool. Our plan today is this morning to cover the breakdown of step 2 and 3 of the Niyata sequence. So you can get notes and do that, and then we'll practice, we'll meditate, or meditate practice, we'll figure that out. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the kind of the law of attraction, what we call the law of creation, and just the mechanics of it, and how people go about doing it wrong, and then our framework that we use to really, literally have created what you all are experiencing right now. The house I'm living in, house John's living in, our wives, everything is born from just a methodical way of looking and saying, this is what I want, and then being daring enough and trusting enough to go get it. Cool. That's what we'll talk about in the afternoon.
Quick question. Yesterday was, the practice was a little sweatier. How did it feel meditating after the practice? Did that feel all right, or was it intense?
It was less intense than normal. Yeah, it was less than normal. Yeah. But
So it felt good?
I do think it's hard. I don't know. On my body, it's hard, I think, to sit still like that, maybe
After the practice versus before the practice? Because that's where he's really getting at is, do you feel more successful meditation before or after the practice? After.
Yeah, and yesterday was much.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
The last 2 teacher trainings, because they were virtual and we were even up till yesterday working out the mechanics of how do we live stream with other people and work this out, we had been practicing and then meditating.
Mm-hmm. The first couple, I think the first ones that we did live without live streaming, everybody was here. We would meditate and then practice. And that's what we've been doing for a long time, only because if it's an intense practice, sweaty practice, it's harder on your body, easier on your mind probably, because after you're practicing, the mind will settle, and it's easier to meditate for the mind, but maybe not for the body. That's kind of the why behind it. So that's kind of the question: is did it feel better? All right, do this. Close your eyes. And we'll look at Zoom people too. Zoom people, you guys can close your eyes too. Raise your hand if you prefer to meditate before practicing. Okay, put your hands down. Raise your hands if you prefer to meditate after practicing. You see everybody over there? Okay, and then put your hands down. All right, so in this room, it was overwhelmingly after.
Same on Zoom.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll do that.
And just so everyone's clear with it as well, I mean if you look at the process, the movement and the original intent of why it was designed was to support meditation. But it wasn't, it wasn't asana like we're doing it on the mat. So that's why we want to know your feedback, because it's like, okay, move the body to get yourself set to meditate. It wasn't like move the body vigorously for 75 or 90 minutes in heat with sweat rolling and then sit and meditate after the fact. It still works for a lot of us, but anyway, that's because it's like we're kind of doing it, but it's not in the pure way that of what movement's really designed to do, really to wake up the body, wake up the mind, and immediately sit and utilize that awareness. Does that make sense?
Question then. So in Savasana, that's the whole purpose of why we move the body, correct? And then Savasana is kind of like a meditation state. Why don't we meditate like that? Like when you're in Savasana? Like, because when I first started meditating, that's how I did it.
Yeah, the majority of people.
Oh, hold on real quick. So Jay just asked, why don't we, if the point of the practice in Shavasana is that experience of meditation, why don't we meditate like we're like in Shavasana? Okay.
Most people fall asleep. That's the simple answer is most people, we've trained ourselves for our lifetimes to when we lay down to go to sleep. And when you're trying to get the mind to settle, most people will lose consciousness. AKA fall asleep, yeah. And most people are, I mean, honestly, most people are overworked anyway. Most people aren't. We talked about this yesterday. Most people want to take naps. Like we want to have sleepy time. Like I don't know, curl up with a blanket a little bit, like just 20 minutes at least in the afternoon. Most people are overworked and they're stimulated. They're using caffeine to stay awake and get their work done and all of that, right? They're not resting enough. They're not taking care of themselves enough. And so if you try to lie down or teach people to lie down and meditate, the majority of them will fall asleep. So that's the why. The more a straight spine, vertical spine will help keep an alert mind is the idea. And so the more we sit upright, the more alert we can be. Because meditation is not for relaxation. That's a byproduct of meditation. Meditation is the training of focus or the training of our awareness, right? So that we can get strong enough in that muscle to be able to hold our attention to whatever it is for as long as we choose to. That's really that's the key of what we're doing, you know. I mean, is that clear? And two, we talked about this yesterday a little bit. When you're meditating, realize that is the goal, right? That is the purpose, is to get the mind to settle, to hold your attention to one point for as long as possible. And if the mind turns, you catch it and you come back. You do that however many times. That's reps, right? If you have a spiritual experience while you're meditating, it can happen. Things can happen. You can see lights or have feelings or levitate or something. I don't know. Like you can have these experiences. Just let it be an experience, because what will happen inevitably, and this has happened to Chris and I, is we'll have an experience like that. In the next meditation, I'm trying to chase that. I'm looking for that. Well, I want to do that again. I want to feel that again. I want to experience that again. And so every meditation afterwards becomes a chase for that experience, right? All of a sudden we lose the purpose. And the purpose, again, is not to have that experience that may happen as a byproduct of meditating. The purpose is to keep the mind focused and train our attention, to get the mind to shut up, basically. Get the mind to still, right? So that's really the goal. And so that's done through sitting upright and using anchors and different things like that. Does that make sense?
Melody said that yesterday when we were meditating, she lay down in Shavasana for it because her hip flexors were on fire, bothering her. I don't know if she didn't say she had an injury or anything, but that's one of the, yes, this is designed because of physiologically what happens when you sit upright, what happens for the mind. Think about back in our ancestral days when you sit upright to look above the grass and see if there's any predators, how awake and alert you'd have to be, because it's like life or death. Same thing physiologically happens now. When we sit upright, we become more alert. That's the design of it. Why? Because we want to hone our attention, our concentration. But given physical ailments, injuries and stuff like that, modify as you need to. If you need to lay down, you can do it. If it's, morning time, you just woke up, you're not sleepy, you'll probably be okay with it. But it's just important. We are kind of parsing this out because Shavasana isn't meditation. You can focus the mind like you do in meditation, but because of the rigor of the class, it's specifically designed for you to relax, final relaxation. If we're getting deeper into it, it's actually Shavasana or corpse pose, meaning you're symbolically dying, recognizing your mortality. Like, this is a tough one to like weave into a class when you're doing a drop-in setting. By the way, you're symbolically dying right now to all of your old ways. Right? Like, what the hell just happened? I thought I was relaxing. No, you're actually dying. But if you look at it, even I think it was Saint Francis of Assisi. He has a quote of saying, "I die daily." And what is really happening in that, and it's, I think, actually, so in these deeper meditative aspects, you can become breathless and create this state of suspended animation where literally like the internal workings of your body cease. And physiologically, if you looked at yourself and like someone had you all set up, you would be dead. And there's like hundreds of anecdotes of these masters of years of old who have gotten their bodies to that state. One dude was buried for a week. A week. This is documented. And then was exhumed and like alive. And so what St. Francis is saying and what like the symbology of corpse pose is there's actual like real anecdotal evidence of the cessation of what it means for us to be alive, like breath ceasing, heart rate slowing to a point where you can no longer, like, it's not beating anymore without dying. I think that's where he was going because he was a Christian mystic that was like doing that type of practice. We're not going there. So for us, what it really means is to like symbolically die to our old ways of being, right? To be totally present and not let our past encumber upon the present moment. And then get your mind focused on the here and now so that you're not in the past, you're not in the future. Essentially like being reborn in the moment. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. But relaxation embedded in the class because of what was just done. Meditation not designed to be relaxing, designed to be, focus enhancing, concentration enhancing, so that we can experience a peaceful presence. Peace is what we're looking for in meditation, right? Not relaxation. It's relaxing because when you're at peace, you're not stressed, you're not freaked out, you're not angry, you're not all the other affects.
Wait, would you say peace is what we're...
Peace is the aim of meditation, Yeah. Now, you could say peace is the aim in Shavasana as well. The difference I'm articulating now is that is going to be relaxing because you've just worked the body so intensely. And this is not designed to be relaxing because we are sitting upright. And this is, as you know, like 20, 30 minutes into it, this is challenging for the body to be in this position. It takes effort. That's the main difference. The effort that's required to be in this is not the effort that's required to be in Shavasana. And this is what we're focusing on as the formal practice of meditation, because we're conditioned when we lay down to fall asleep. We're cool with it because if you need to take a nap, like in Shavasana, I don't, like, unless you're snoring in class and then we got to wake you up. There's one dude who always comes in like 30 minutes beforehand and he's like, like, hey, man, it's not like, this isn't the atmosphere people are coming into.
We've literally started a class. Everyone's up and doing. Person's still sleeping. There you go, nudge them. Like, hey, we're starting now.
Music on. We've ohmed, and they're still laying down. Like, this was not quiet. And so I'm teaching this. It was a different class than John's talking about. And I'm teaching the class, and I'm like, wait, should I help them? Like, because this is my point. I'm like, man, if they're sleeping, they're probably tired of shit, and they probably need a nap. That may be as like beneficial to them as movement. So by, I think it was by like sweeping crescents, I go over, and I'm like, hey, we started. You can sleep though. And she got up, like, no, all embarrassed. Yeah. Yeah. Is it fair to
Alice, did
say
you have a
nothing?
question?
Hey, Philip, Phil, what do you mean by, is this fair to say nothing and just being is the goal? You mean in Shavasana or in meditation?
in meditation, homie. Like so peace is still one of the, if you look at peace and rage, they're still on the opposite sides of the spectrum. You know, so that in the middleness is, you know, that I strive for is, you know, that nothing, that just pure, like middle ground. And like, you're still, I know like you use the word peace, and it's like, I was just curious because like we talk about stillness and nothing and just being, you know, and it's peaceful. Like we describe it like that because we're not like upset or anything, but it's definitely going deep and like philosophical on this one. As I'm like cramming my caffeine this morning. However, do you kind of grab what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
totally. Go
I
ahead.
wouldn't look at think about this, Phil. Don't think about it as peace is the opposite of anger or rage. Look at it as peace is the absence of anger or rage. So they're not on either side of the spectrum. It's is it present or not? And because when you're in
I
it,
dive more in, like get ready to start working with the monks and the good jazz. Like they are two extremes. They are like extremely deadly warriors, you know, but at the same time, like they're very peaceful people, and their balance is like found in the middle. Like they're like true power, and like they can lie in that middle. They can tap into both. So I guess I've been looking at the word like peace versus like rage as not necessarily rage, but like talking about the war, whatever word you want to fill with that, is like on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I would look at it like this, where the real intent is that the psychological stillness, right?
Yeah.
Once you've attained that psychological stillness, or you can, whatever words you want to use, like the nothing, where there is no mind and you are just in pure awareness. That's the aim, right? That's what we're shooting for. And what you experience in that state is peace. You know, so you may look at it like, okay, we're talking about peace versus other effects of emotion, but where you're going, it's true in a sense of like the real aim isn't necessarily peace, but it's how we describe right now with where we are, the feeling of what that stillness brings us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So cool.
So you're
yeah.
still going deeper into that like psychological stillness, that presence, and when you're there long enough, and this is what we're aiming to get to, is when you can focus for longer periods of time, and that effort to focus the mind and be there becomes effortless. There's a deepening of the awareness of what's actually there. So to your point, like peace may even be like a more superficial affect of what's happening in it, because what we're really getting towards, and these are some of the spiritual experiences John and I have had that we were chasing, is this feeling of being connected to everything, what Deepak Chopra calls unity consciousness, where it's like, oh, I'm not separate. That's it. I'm not separate. I'm not disconnected. I'm not isolated. I'm not lacking anything. That's the experience when you're there long enough. So like peace, to your point, is like, if I'm looking at levels, I'm in emotion, right? I'm future and past, and I stabilize that, and all of a sudden I'm not future and past, and I stop identifying myself and who I am with my experiences and with what's going to happen, and all of a sudden that brings me a sense of peace. But as I stay more dialed into that experience, it goes deeper, and all of a sudden it's not peace that we're really aiming for. It is initially, because I'm not now like in this binary future, past, regret, worry, and all the other stories that we tell ourselves. We get deeper into it, and all of a sudden what we experience is our connection with all things. Yeah, exactly right. So beyond, I guess to my point, is beyond peace, right? It's not like peace is like, you're not even thinking about that. Like peace of no shit peace, because like, how could I not be at peace? I'm one with all things.
but you have to use
I'm
words
with everything.
You have to use words to be able to describe it, and that's
right.
that's the challenge is how to wrap words around the experience of psychological stillness and deep connection, right? Because you could
I've
also
had a couple
love.
friends ask me basics like meditation, and I used the word peace for a few of them when I first started talking, and I actually got kind of I'm not gonna be able to find peace. Well, I've got too much going on. Like peace was such an extreme for them to fathom, but they they were like, hey, I'm interested and I want to start doing like 3-minute meditations and just see what this is about. Hey, yeah, it'll be peaceful. Okay, fuck that. Like, there's, just like, well, I don't have time for peace because I've got too much going on. But so, like, if it was like more beneficial trying to get people to start meditating. Obviously, you guys have way more experience than this, like a bigger pool of people you've dealt with. It's just saying, like, hey, it's just to find stillness and to calm the mind, and boom. Like, we're not talking about peace is actually like throwing people off this day and age because they're like, that's not attainable for me. So they're negative. They're already like pulling away from the idea of even starting to meditate.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a super important point for you all to know how to influence people in your sphere, right? That you want to be a part of this. We're speaking to, you all have raised your hand to be like, you know what? I want to be a part of this teacher training. So we can use words like, hey, the real purpose of this is to find peace. And that's actually not really it. It's unity consciousness because we want to one. And you're like, got it, cool, I'm here, we're doing it. If you use that language to someone who doesn't do yoga, you're going to lose them right off the bat. So the point is, like, you got to, what's super important, and this is, you're kind of talking about marketing, but it's real. Like, we're always doing this in the way we influence people.
Yeah, we got to get people in too. It's not just about business. Like, we got to get people in to like to be able to help them. So
no, don't. I'm looking at like the marketing of awakening. Like, how do you help people wake up? Meaning, how do we help influence people to live, like, to experience their truth and to recognize these truths and like to embody them and live? Like, I'm not trying to sell them anything, but you're trying to sell them on a idea that they should be practicing this so that they can live a happier, more abundant, more peaceful life. My point is, you got to start where they are. If I use the word peace for somebody like who is like my brother-in-law who practices yoga a lot when he was courting my sister. Once he like married her, it was like, I'm not really into it that much. Yeah, he's awesome. He's an awesome dude. And now he's getting back into it. But the way I would talk to him about why he should meditate, I would have to wrap it around something he values that he's having trouble with. Work, being more productive. Like, not, it's the seeds, but
or relationships.
Phil, to your point, the friends you're talking to, and this is like whoever you want to serve as you walk out of here, fall in love with their problems and understand them more than you understand yourself, which actually understanding yourself, you understand all people, which is kind of interesting. But my point is, know where their pain points are, know where their problems are, so that you're talking to them in a way that they actually care about.
We're doing this all the time. You guys are marketing to your kids to influence them to get them to do something. You're marketing to your significant other to influence them to get them to do something. You're doing this with your boss. You're to influence them to get them to do something. You're doing this with your employees if you are a boss, to influence them to get them to do something. We're constantly marketing, constantly. The only difference is they're probably not exchanging money with you, right? That's it. But we're sharing ideas with our friends and family and in a way that we want them to take a better action in their lives, right? And so what Chris is describing is, how do you market? How do you influence people? You speak to them on the level of their problems. Right? It's not tricky or anything else. Marketers, really good marketers will do this. Really good marketers will do this. They'll talk to you on the level of your problem, because then there's connection. They understand. They'll talk to you. They'll tell you a story about their problem that's related to your problem. Then there's connection, right? So it's just the reality of what it is. If you can use that now, when we're talking to other people about yoga, I'm connecting with them on what I believe their problem is. Our brother-in-law, I'm not talking about unity consciousness. He doesn't give a shit. Well, he does, but he doesn't, right? He doesn't care about that. I have to talk to him about, back pain, relationship stuff, or productivity and work. It's all yoga, right? It's all what we're doing. When you get the mind to focus on one thing for as long as you choose to, it doesn't matter what it is, guys. Your relationship with your significant other, your relationship with your kids, your work, whatever it is, your health, and it requires our focus, our unbreakable focus. And this is what meditation does for us. It's what yoga practice does for us. So if you're wanting to shift somebody Or maybe it is marketing. Maybe you leave here and you're like, all right, how do I do this? How do I make my work, even if it's a side hustle, how do I make my work with this? That I've just invested my time, my money, my energy for like 8 months, right? For a long time. You've done the work. If you finish it, how now do I go out and do this? Right? It's going to be the same thing. Decide who you want to work with. That's most important. And then be able to talk to them about the problem they're experiencing.
And on a more granular level, like so Phil, the reason we brought this up is because like who you're talking to, know who you're talking to. Like if it's a friend, just know who they are and know and speak to them in a way that you think they will resonate with the message so that they will then take action to be a part of what you have going on. Super simple. We're doing this literally all the time. Yeah, exactly right. Elizabeth said, and this is so true, another way to market is to allow your own life to be your testimony. When others see you handle life in a calm, measured way, they will often ask, what's your secret? Or how did you handle that so well? Then you have an opening to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Right? This is why, do you have a shirt on? No, we don't. To teach is to demonstrate, right? Just learn this information, apply it in your own life, and just live your life. And then someone's going to ask, because no one will listen to advice, right? If they didn't, you're not like, hey, you know what? Your life's kind of a shit show. You should start meditating and doing yoga with me. What do you think they're going to do? Like they're going to, oh, you know what? You're right.
Has anyone ever tried that? Yeah, friends, family, like you really got to do yoga.
You know, it's funny is I just had this conversation with my brother. Like, you were so harsh on him. And you know what he did? He jumped into a high yoga class in Colorado with my sister-in-law. And then I talked to him the next day. He's all calm, cool. Sometimes you got to take stands for people. Sometimes people aren't open either.
Yeah.
Or they're just not open. So it's again knowing your audience where if somebody is having a problem they're coming to you. Sometimes it is to say the hard things.
Yeah.
My husband's like, gosh. He's like, that's who I'm married to.
Yeah.
He actually did it. And I was so proud of him. And you know, and when I talked to him, I'm like, you should be proud of yourself that you stepped through something that you wouldn't have done unless I was like, it was cool though.
That's
But
awesome.
it is, but you got to know, are they open? Are they not open? You know, because like my uncle, he's always talking about like his body pains. And I'm like, you should do some yoga. And we're talking about someone that's never even experienced. He's like, yeah, but we're going to a lake house and Denver Lake House. And we're going to do a session on the
We will teach.
and stuff. Getting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
that's awesome.
Best way, last thing we'll say, then we'll move on, is you should is always going to be met with resistance, period. Now, if you tell a story about you or someone else who had a very similar experience that they're experiencing and how they went about helping themselves via yoga or via meditation or whatever it is, and you just leave it there, you've left the door open. Or you say, you know, I've got this story, but you're probably not going to hear it and literally hear it. And so I don't worry about it. Oh, leave that open the loop and then say it's probably not for you. They will be running to hear that story and to do what you're asking them to do. Again, it's just psychological warfare. That's all it is.
It goes back to what
We call it mental jujitsu.
guys, it goes back to what we were talking about at some session we had, how everybody has a belief. Everyone has a belief that's upheld by a story, their experience in life. That the stories that you have of your life hold your beliefs. Right? So you have a belief around love, you have a belief around money, you have a belief around food, you have a belief around sex, you have a belief around what a relationship should be with your significant other. You should have a belief around what your relationship with your kids or your parents should be, right? All based around stories. If you tell a story that connects with somebody, your own personal story, somebody else's story, you can change a belief. You can shift their belief, even if it's just a little bit enough for them to start to move in the direction in which you want them to move into. This is what Elizabeth was saying that was so powerful. Elizabeth said is that tell your story, right? Tell somebody else's story, someone that's close to you that you know their story. It will change people's belief.
If you want
and allow them to do amazing things, right? Unlock them, because our beliefs set our boundaries, right? We don't rise to our goals, we fall to our systems. We don't rise to our goals. We can set lofty goals, but over and over again, we will simply fall to our system. This is why it's so vital, if we have goals, to change our systems, to create rituals, to create these patterns in our lives that will get us to those goals. We don't rise to our goals. We fall to our systems. What is the things that are habitual? What are the things you do daily? And if they don't get you to where you want to go, you have to change those. Does that make sense?
If you want to supercharge that, empathize with them first. Seek to understand them. Live in their shoes, and then acknowledge that I can see why you see the world that way, why you feel that way. I totally understand. If you don't do that first, they're never going to listen to you. People, all we want is to be understood and to be heard and to be listened to. When you do that for somebody and then you weave a story about somebody that's transformed their life in a way, it's gold for them. It's crazy. Like when you see, like, especially on social, the vitriol of judgment and self-righteousness of you should do this and anyone doesn't do this is just you take it in any political state, whatever it is, whatever the topic is. The real power of helping to influence people to see the way you see it is to first understand how they see it and to empathize with them. Not saying you agree with them, but just to empathize, man, I guess if I lived that way and saw the world that way, I would probably think the way you think. But by the way, have you then saw it from this perspective? Because I totally get that, but maybe we could all achieve the same end if we, you know what I'm saying? It's empathy that is the catalyst to help influence people, woven then into a story. And that's literally the only opportunity we have to make change in people's lives, especially if it's our story that we're telling. But it doesn't have to be. It can be anyone's story.
Acknowledgement too. I think what happens a lot of times, even though people, they know they're good at something, but acknowledgement and one of the exercises I've learned in my marriage is just simply ask my husband, what do you want to be acknowledged for today? And let people, and that's when you ask people that question, they literally are like, what? And so when you acknowledge people for, thank you for working so hard. Thank you so much that you were with the children all day. I so greatly appreciate that. And I know that that's hard. Acknowledgement also, and I did that with my brother too. I know you work really hard. I understand that you have that back pain, so it is the empathy that really helps that conversation to acknowledge people for their gifts and what they bring.
Yeah.
And that beautiful platform of try this.
You can't acknowledge if there's not first an empathy, because the acknowledgement is the recognition, the verbal recognition or act that says, I see you, I see what you're doing, and I thank you for that. That my point is empathy is still the ground that acknowledgement then lives on top of, but it's that next level of action that I empathize with you. Now I'm going to verbally say, hey, thank you. I appreciate that. That's one of my love languages, by the way. When my wife, she doesn't need to buy anything or do anything. It's hey, I see how hard you're working. Thank you. This was a conversation I needed to have with her, because her way of showing that love was, why are you staying up so late? Why are you doing that? Don't do that. And then I take that as judgment. And it's not, it's love. And she's doing it out of love because she wants me to be healthy and happy. And she's like, man, you're working so hard. Don't do that. And I'm like, no. We had to have a sit down. I don't receive that. It's not how I operate. Because I'm doing this for us. And when you tell me not to do it, and I hear it as judgment and that I shouldn't be working as hard as I am for you all. That's how, and so this is what I need from you. This is a hard conversation because I'm exposing weakness. And for men, weakness is death, right? Literally, weak equals death. It's evolutionary. And I had to sit there and be like, hey, if you could communicate in this way for me, just acknowledge, and what will help is that when you acknowledge it, I can see it, and then it'll help me to know that you're with me, and it'll also, I now tie that to you wanting to make me healthy, right? It's really, really powerful stuff. Anyway, it takes humility, it takes empathy, it takes all this stuff, right? It's love, right?
When you're in that stillness and that it's love, able to give that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Last thing we'll say, and then we'll move on, is Elizabeth said vulnerability is not the same as weakness. Brene Brown. You guys remember that Brene Brown one? Yeah. And vulnerability, birthplace of joy, love, connection, belonging, also the core of shame, and guilt, and all the other shit. That's why it sucks to be there, right? Okay, cool. Let's move on.
Let's pull out something to write on, something to write with.
Is it a quiz or is it a drill?
It's a quiz.
Okay. Just want to make sure I knew what.
Which book? Which book do I use? So at the top, it's pretty straightforward. Right, 8-limb path. 8-limb path. So it's going to be the first limb that has 5 sublimbs to it, 5 little limbs. And then the second limb also has 5 little limbs. Make sure you write those down. Sanskrit is extra credit.
Yeah, John, will you repeat that?
Oh yes, 8-limb path. And so writing down the 8-limb path. So obviously there's 8 of those. If you can do Sanskrit, the first 2 limbs have 5 sublimbs. So make sure you write those 5 sublimbs, the first 2 limbs.
Did you say English and Sanskrit?
I said Sanskrit's extra credit. We have a conversation with Larry. Be right back. Okay.
just wondering because I know about that.
Yeah, he said it's gonna be today.
He's not.
No.
Okay. I was
You should have gotten an email. Message him real quick.
Oh no. I wasn't like trying to be like.
No, but Chris, it just sparked something. He wasn't. We made the announcement yesterday about the new link on Zoom. He wasn't there, so if he's not checking his emails today, was probably trying to get onto the other Zoom link, and then. No, you're good. You're
I
good.
know I'm gonna hunt him down.
Amy told us.
Yeah. You know, so you know. Things that are under the bus.
I just didn't know if he was like able to come.
No, it may be a Zoom thing. He may be trying to get on the other one, or have tried to get on the other one. So we need another minute. And we need one more minute. Yes. Raise your hand if you need another minute. Okay. The path that they followed to develop it. And you guys have the same opportunities if you want, whatever we decide to focus on. All right, we got in that discussion, but that's my rant.
Mahasamadhi. Kelly.
Yeah, Mahasamadhi.
Thanks, Kelly.
Right. So you can, right, to bring it back to that, you can develop yourself in ways that you're able to leave your body if you choose to. You're able to experience bliss when you choose to. You're able to, whatever the thing is, have that intuition. Whatever dematerialize, bilocate, whatever the thing is, right? But the key isn't to like chase those things, in our opinion. The key is to simplify it and say, can I just start with having a better life? Can I just start with not torturing myself in my mind all the time, right? Can I start with the simple things? And as we start to develop those simple things, maybe we move in that direction, right? Let's just start with having a beautiful relationship with playing in the world that we're living in, making a living doing what you love to do, right? Having a phenomenal experience in life. We get to choose it, guys. The fucked up part is that most people don't choose it. They don't think they can choose it. They think they're victims of circumstance, right? And there's too many examples of people being in crazy ass shit circumstances and shifting it and creating phenomenal lives. Oprah Winfrey is a perfect example of it. Tons of other people, right? Tons of other people, but we see it all around us, right? Let's choose it. Let's make a difference in our lives and have an amazing experience doing this, right? Good.
Awesome.
All right, let's shift.
Can you just say literally the 8 limb path really quick, like each one? I can't ever pronounce them. Yeah, can you pronounce them?
Yeah. Restraints. No, I'm just
Eight.
Non-violent. No, I'm just kidding. Yama. Yama.
I'll say the English. John will say
you can
the
smack me
Sanskrit.
later.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yamas, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, apirigraha, niyamas, sauka or saucha, santosha, tapas, swadhyaya or svadhyaya, isvara pranadana, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Do you want the other ones? Okay. And a Sanskrit scholar would tear me to pieces, but that's my best go at it. When it gets long enough, I'll be able to say the Sanskrit well. Cool. Any other questions? We're going to jump into some breakdown. You guys want to take a quick break? All right, let's take a quick break. We'll take a 2-minute break. And we'll come back and we're going to jump into some clinicking. We'll finish step 2 and 3 of Niyata.
Yeah, Elizabeth, it's so true. Elizabeth wrote, whoever's saying that when John was talking about Wim Hof, because he's built up a tolerance the same way people can build up their lung capacity to freakish breath holding extremes. We can do the same with our capabilities, physical, mental, and spiritual.
Totally, Elizabeth. That was spot on.
For any of those who are just hanging out, there's a a series on Netflix called Home Game, and it's like all these cultures that have these different like unique games that they play in their culture. And in the Philippines, it's free diving, and they're the Sama people, and they're poor, they're kind of like shunned by the rest of the Philippine society, but they've over like generations they've increased the size and efficiency of their
Capillaries?
no, appendix or so. It's not appendix, but it's something, not lungs, but it's related to the blood exchange. And so they have a higher capability of holding more oxygen in their blood than others. And this dude, like it's their livelihood. That's how they eat every day, is they free dive and spearfish. And this one dude was kind of the religious leader of the Sama people.
Chris, are you talking about the alveoli in the lungs or the arterioles at the spot where they exchange venous and arterial blood?
I think it's the arterials.
Yeah,
But
it's pretty cool. And the
yeah.
folks on Guam do the same thing. And there are folks that go out there and free dive, and they can be underwater for like 10 minutes. I mean, it's
so
impressive.
wild.
And 10 minutes isn't like the max. That's just the average, right?
Oh my God.
Some guys that can hold their breath, and you're like, oh my God, he's dead. Send someone in after him. But nope. They pop up, and the Japanese do the same thing and they do it very specifically because they dive for pearls.
Yeah, it's wild.
So cool.
So this guy, like, that's what he does, and it must be different too, because they did they went to, I forget where it was, but wherever the free diving competition was, and like it's like regulated and there's like rules and stuff, and the difference is like they go down.
Yeah.
Like what it was like. I think he was going for the national record, which was like 67 meters.
Yeah.
And and he was saying like he can hold his breath longer than 3 minutes, but because of the depth and the pressure that gets exerted on the body going down, they showed it on the show, and when he came back up, blacked out, passed out, and they had to revive him. And like the 2 other people did the same thing during that competition because they're just pushing themselves to the extreme.
So
crazy. But it's just wild. But like 3 minutes of holding your breath at a depth of 67 meters. That's like, what is that, over 30? That's like 180 feet down. It's just wild. But to the point, like they've cultivated the capacity because they've done the work, you know?
Yeah.
Really fascinating. I think now.
Do you want to move, or you want a clinic?
How do you trade off for 2 and 3? Only in the first talk. decisions do we need to make sure, like obviously safety is good and health is good and all that stuff, and we're doing everything we need to do, but also understanding that what they're saying, these regulations are going is not.
So the baritone thing, that's like kind of cool. So was that, because Jimmy came one time with the guy from the baritone. Is it, do you guys does he have a connection with the company?
He's our brother-in-law.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So
Byron-
the
Byron
reason why I
Eva.
was like, I love him is it's so funny the first time he came, he was, I don't know, Jen and I like put two and two together who he was, like never met him before.
You see him in the picture?
Yeah,
The
he was
pi-
like, one of them is not like the other. But he was
Yeah, sorry guys, you're on mute. We're not talking about anything. We're just shooting the shit. We're getting started right now. Yeah, so he's our brother-in-law. Yeah. And he didn't have that business prior to COVID. Like he saw like, oh my God, this is an opportunity.
Like, he just, that's kind of like how he is.
Mm. Yeah, he's an entrepreneur through and through. He was doing it before and just adapting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, you unmuted?
I am.
Hello. Oh my God. I'm off today. We're recording the whole time.
Oh, you're recording all that?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Well, most of it was on mute, so it's okay. We'll just chop it up. Okay, ready?
You'll chop it up.
All right, so let's jump into clinicking. We'll try to get through step 2 and step 3. So we finish hands to feet pose. Will you go hands to feet for me? Stomach to thighs, chest to knees. I think we actually finished where we talked about rocking the weight a little forward towards the end, right? And then again, that helps to protect the knees for those that have straight legs. From there, you put a little bend, release the grip, put a little bend in the knees, rotate the palms away, sweep high, and then you come into mountain pose. And now officially we're done with step 1. We're transitioning to step 2. First pose of step 2 is awkward. Awkward in this lineage different than awkward in the vinyasa, the Krishnamacharya lineage. So it's done arms forward, hands at shoulder height and shoulder width. You want to face them for a second. Immediately, for whatever reason, if people have limited range of motion or injuries in the shoulders, you can bring the palms together, prayer position. That's a good modification. So whether you have that or not, the arms go forward. The feet distance is about mountain pose. Some people need to go a little bit wider, and it's totally fine. I say that it's roughly about 6 inches or so, but they can adjust a little bit wider. Like some people that squat, they have to go wider with their feet because of like hip structural differences. So arms forward, and then he'll push the hips back and bend the knees. So this is the basic body position, right? Hips push back, knees bend, and immediately I say lower, push the hips back, bend the knees an inch, and you're in the pose. There's the modification. You just keep the hips higher. To deepen, the hips drop down more. The deepest level, the tops of the thighs parallel the floor. Notice what's happening for him. Go to whatever level you want to. You don't have to go all the way down. As he goes down, so stand all the way up. Notice what happens upper torso as he goes down. Starts leaning, 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 leaning. It's got to happen. It's okay. That's in this first position. This is going to be the alignment because his hips are going back. His arms and his body have to cantilever forward to create the balance point. Otherwise, he would fall backwards. So once you're in that position, again, it's really up to people. There's not it's a very simple pose. The hips push back, the knees bend. The weight is in the heels. You will hear cues like lift the toes to make sure the weight is in the right position, but it's also important to keep the toes grounded. It really depends on how the knees feel, on how the hips feel, the low back feels. That's really dictating the depth here. Obviously strength as well. The idea when you start pushing the hips back, and this depends on your proportion, you want the hips to go back because you don't want the knees to pitch forward of the toes. The weight back into the heels. Now, some people, the knees, as they start going lower, right, remember the counterbalancing, they will start sliding forward. But if they're in line with the toes, it's okay. but not forward of the toes. We will change this once the heels lift, but it's the same relationship as far as the ankles are concerned. All right, you want to add anything to that?
No, that's everything. The deepest level.
Yeah, and then once you're there, deepest level, the way to, like, you can juice this up a little bit is when you're like, okay, at the end, the spine leans back. As you try to bring the spine back, it fires up the legs, it fires up the core, because what you're fighting against and using strength to fight against is the natural body of the movement of the body leaning forward as it counterbalances the hips going back. Some people say the fullest expression is hips, spine, if spine straight, and you create a 90-degree angle at the hips. Proportionally, it's unrealistic for probably most of the population.
Unless they have really long arms. Really long arms. So they can pull it way out.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no, I've never seen it.
Yeah, and I don't even know what type of proportion would be good. My brother Jimmy he's probably most upright I've seen somebody in this first part of awkward.
Really little torso.
Yeah, he's very short. He's a very short man. I would just, so it's like full disclosure, I would say that if he were in this room. So I feel comfortable saying that while he's not in this room. All right, so that's the first part. Once you get him in the position, so the arms reach forward, you separate the feet, you take an inhale. As you exhale, hips push back, knees bend. That's the pose. To deepen, hips lower down more, the deepest level, thighs parallel the floor. Once you've got that, it's vertical stabilization. Pull the ribs back, pull the low belly in, draw the tailbone down, anchor the four corners of the feet, exhale, and as you inhale, stand tall. So it's a very simple pose. And the cueing of it, once you've got it, if you're like, what do I say? Always revert back to vertical stabilization. This is a 3-part pose. So the next part, the heels lift. As the heels lift, the knees bend. Now, again, same thing. 1 inch is the pose. That's the modification. Just don't lower down as much. Because the heels are lifting, now it's okay for the knees to slide forward of the toes because we've changed the angle at the ankles, right? Does that make sense? Now the alignment is to make sure that the shoulders stay stacking over the hips. What happens for a lot of people is their shoulders will slide forward as they go down. It's not necessary because we're not trying to bring the hips back. We're trying to bring the hips straight down. Shoulders over the hips. The deepest level in this one is hips just above the knees to keep that angle. It actually requires more strength than to bring the thighs parallel. One last thing. Oh yeah, so a little added help is as you lift the heels and the hips drop down. Once you've got that, again, it's very simple. A nice cue is try to press the heels forward to lift the heels higher. It's that forward motion that gets the lift. It's easier to balance. See how we kind of found the platform of the toes there? It's ironically easier to balance there than it is for him to be, lower the heels down a little bit. There. So heels forward, forward, forward. Then the hips drop down. Questions about second part?
I have such a hard time with that.
Yeah.
Where's the weakness?
Where are you feeling it?
I don't feel, I guess I just don't feel comfortable rolling my hips or rolling up onto my heels to that
angle.
degree.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I lose strength.
Strength, like, is it like a balance issue because you're holding up?
Yeah,
And tightness in the bottom of the feet, maybe.
I'll look at the pose and see. And back in the days when we could touch people, back
in the old days,
there's a really great assist that someone did it to me when I was in teacher training, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna use that one until recently. You can kind of stabilize in there, and all you do is just say, I'll just lift that heel and say, lift the other one the same. And what's really fascinating is a lot of people, it's just all it is it's just a connection of the foot to the brain. You know, and once you just give them that little assist, all of a sudden you help the connection you create the connection for them, and then they can repeat it over and over again. So if we end up in times where it's okay to touch people's feet again, that's a good one to do. Cool?
I do have something.
Yeah.
It's going to come out as a statement. So I thought
It's both. And the reason I say it's both is like if it was like going here with no bend in the knees isn't doing the work, like it's not cultivating the strength and the competency that we're trying to get, and lowering the heels down like lower and working on the hips going down, that's not it either. And so the real answer is like try to go as high as you can, and then wherever that is, start going down with the hips, even if it means your heels drop a little bit, and then just play around with where that balance is for you. Does that make sense? And it's important just to look at, well, one extreme, is that why it is? No. Other extreme, no. So it's that middle of like, get them as high as you can, then lower, and then you'll play around with wherever that balance is. And her question, everyone, was, is it more important to keep the heels high, or is it more important to get the hips low? So if you didn't hear, that's why the answer is it's both. Try to get the heels as high as you can, and then work the hips down. Cool? Okay, third one gets a little trickier for people. And so once you've lifted the heel, you've come out of the second part, you say drop the heels down. And then, let's turn to face them for a second. From there, the heels will lift a little bit, and the knees are going to come together to squeeze the inner thighs towards each other. The heels lift, so as you rotate, it's a thigh movement and not any pressure in rotating at the knees. Immediately, once I cue that, I say the modification, which is, if you have severe knee issues, feel free to repeat the first or the second part. Because for some people, doing this isn't going to feel good in their knees. For some, it's just deeply flexing the knees. So for some, it's just the angle. For some, it's the descent that fires the knees up. I don't know exactly what's going on with each of those examples, but that's just the reality of what we've experienced over the years we've been doing this.
The challenge is to do a quick intake enough to be able to identify what it is. Because if it's a deep flexion of the knee, me doing this, where I thought Chris was going to go with it, is not going to matter, because that still could be too much pain in the knee, right? Just because it's a deep flexion. Whereas you see the first two parts, you don't have that deep flexion, right? It's not there. So they could do the first or second part again. If it's just on the descent, when they come down, it's intense, but the deep flexion's fine. Then they can help themselves down, place the hands on the lap, place hands on the floor, and then come down that way. And then they can come back up and do that.
So it gets a little bit cumbersome in the wordiness of it, because you're like, okay, third part, lift the heels, bring the knees together. If you need for any knee issues, you can repeat the first or second part. Take an inhale. As you exhale, lower the body down as the heels lift. You can pause halfway. There's the next modification. Pause halfway and hold, or lower all the way down. Sometimes I'll replace, you can pause halfway and hold with, if need be, use your hands to help you down, and do exactly what John just showed you. But it's really important, especially for this one, because you just don't, I don't want to hurt people's knees. And if they have limited range of motion, whatever's going on, to know that, man, there's a lot of different ways you can approach this. Yes, Alice.
What is the purpose in keeping your feet apart and knees coming together, coming down that way?
It helps stabilizing by hugging the inner thighs and activating basically the deep front line. It's just in the descent. Yeah. Unless you have something else to add.
Deep front line work.
Yeah. So once you're down, let's go side view for me. What's important as he descends is the heels have to lift as he lowers down. If the heels don't lift, this is what it's going to look like. Yeah, and the fact that you can do that is pretty amazing. That's great range of motion.
But what you'll see people do is this.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going.
The heel's still lifted a little bit, but they're stuck here.
So the cue, if you see that, is lower the thighs down. And what happens is the thighs lower, their spine has to come back. If you say bring the spine back, a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do it. But if you just say lower the thighs down, immediately as the thighs start lowering, the spine will come back. So and the idea behind the box cue is it's like your arms are parallel to the thighs, so it's like you could fit a box right between the arms and the legs.
Right in the lap.
Yeah, right in the lap. You're squeezing the inner thighs, part of the stabilization and activation of that deep front line, the inner thighs, the adductor magnus muscles. So what you're noticing is that when he's down, he's resting. His calves and his hamstrings are kind of just resting on each other. So obviously there's strength, but there's not as much strength as the first two where you're holding this position, right? Or holding this position, because now you're kind of resting. So you can say the deeper level is if you'd like to lift the hips up an inch or two, you'll work harder because it requires more strength to lift the hips off the heels and to start separating the calves and the hamstrings away from each other. But the key alignment is shoulders over the hips, thighs and arms parallel to the floor or to each other. Cool? Squeeze the thighs, exhale, and as you inhale, slowly press all the way back up to standing, arms down, feet together. All right. Leg strengthener. It's preparing. One of the purposes of this being where it is this is it's like the first standing pose that we're doing to ready the body-mind awareness for the other standing poses that are to come. Cool? Questions? A lot of strengthening aspect, a lot of deep frontline work. Cool? Yeah.
The modification of going all the way down, can you have an option of just not going down at all?
Like this, they're staying upright like this?
Or not necessarily upright like that, but say it isn't so good on the knees and they just want to stay in like the second part or the first part.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, yeah, exactly. If they don't want to go down at all, like the third part's just not going to work for them. That's why we say, like, bring the knees together. If you need, do repeat the first or the second part if you have some knee issues going on. And if they're like, I don't know what I'm about to experience, if they're a new person, then once you start saying, I'll squeeze the thighs and start to lower all the way down so you're sitting on the calves, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's not for me. And if you see, you may need to be like, okay, you can do the first or second part, because they may not catch why they would need that because they don't know what's about to happen for all your new people. That's why it's important for the new people to be towards the back so that people who know what's going on, they get to be the visual demonstration of what's about to happen and what they're doing. So it's easier for you to be like, oh yeah, you can't do that, then do what we just did. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the slight nuance with that is some people may not know what, like, hey, I'm just doing this. Why are you telling me I can do the first or the second part again? Because they don't know this is about to happen. Once they see it, you may need to repeat. By the way, feel free to do the first or second part again. Cool? All right, any questions here? Everyone's good? Okay, so once you've done awkward, you come back to mountain pose. Now we walk to the front of the mat and we turn to the right. What happens here is now this, like, the defining factor of the Niyata sequence, the stability sequence, is in its, we call it stationary way we transition in and out of poses is always through mountain pose. Traditionally, this style was taught where you always initiate right foot out, right foot in, right foot out. So inhale, arms overhead. This will I'll show you. Exhale, big step out to the right. You do the pose on the right heel, pivot the right toes. Bent knee, warrior two, bent knee triangle. Pivot, bent knee triangle. You guys get it? Like right side, left side. And then inhale, right foot to the left, arms overhead. Exhale, arms by your sides. Inhale, arms overhead. Step the right foot out. As you exhale, hinge forward. It's a different sequence, but you guys, you do the pose, you step back in. Step out, step back in, step out, step back in. John and I were in this whole process of trying to figure out what a step back salutation is. And if I step my right foot back and I step my right foot forward, is that really balanced? Oh, no, it's not, because you have to do the same thing on the other side, because it's the transitions isolated from the poses themselves that create the balance, right? You guys catch that with the house metaphor? We had done all that for the vinyasa, and then we still had this antiquated entries and exits, in our opinion, for this class. Why are we stepping in and out with the right foot? Well, we looked into it. It's because it was designed by men. And on the right side, it's the masculine, it's the sun. And the left side is the feminine, it's the moon. Well, we're men, so we initiate everything on the right side. Right foot out, right foot in, right foot out, right foot in.
And initially, if you take it back far enough, yoga asana was only taught to men. Women weren't allowed to do it. Right? And so there was this tradition, for tradition's sake, that was held on to forever and ever and ever. And we're like, that's bullshit. Let's do it a different way. Let's do it in a way that, because we were looking at vinyasa and trying to balance out not only the poses but the movements, we looked at this and said, let's balance out not only the poses but the movements also here. And so that's where Chris is going with this.
Yeah.
Why this was born.
There's a story of a little girl's that's like Thanksgiving, and she sees her mom, and before she puts the ham inside the oven, she cuts off a big corner of it. And she's like, Mom, why do you do that? And she's like, well, I learned it from your grandmother, and she's right over there. Why don't you ask her? And she was like, hey, Grandma, why do we do that? And she was like, well, I did it because my mom did it, and your great-grandmother's right over there. Why don't you go ask her? And she asked her, and she was like, well, honey, back in the day, our ovens were so small, that's the only way we could fit that ham inside of it. Why hold to tradition if it doesn't work? It doesn't make sense anymore is the point of the story, right? They just started doing shit because that's how we always did it. We were like, let's not do it that way if it doesn't make sense. And so our aim is to try to find the balance of the entries and the exits. And I'm prefacing this because what you're going to see is inhale, arms overhead, exhale, big step out to the right. I'll teach this pose in a second, although you guys have already done it. On the right heel, pivot the toes, bend the right knee, warrior two, bent knee triangle, come back out, pivot the toes, other side, bent knee, warrior two, bent knee triangle, pivot the toes. Which way are we going to get out of it? This way. Left foot steps to the right, arms overhead, exhale, arms by your sides. Why? Because now in the next pose, standing separate leg twist, inhale, arms overhead, big step out to the left, hinge forward, left hand grounds, right shoulder stacks, right hand grounds, left shoulder stacks, come up, arms wide. Which way are we going? Right. Right foot meets the left, arms overhead. Because that's the way you balance it. Why always step in and out with the right foot? You could argue the fact, well, does it really matter? For us, it does. Yeah. If you're doing this for a lifetime, we want to create the most balanced sequence that we can, knowing that you're going to live an unbalanced, imbalanced, whatever the word is, life anyway, by being right-handed or by being left-handed or by always doing something in this way versus always doing something in that way. So here, the design for us is let's create the most balanced sequence we can. Does that make sense? The trick is to always know which way you're stepping in. Is the way you step in is the same direction that you're going to step out. If I step in with my right foot, I'm going to continue going right, and I'll step out with my left foot. If I step in with my left foot, I'll continue the motion when I'm done with the pose and step out with my right foot. Does that make sense? Cool. We turn to the right once, and we're going to turn to the left after in step 3 when we get there. Cool. All right, turn notifications off. Zoom land, you guys good? Cool. Does it make sense about the why? Yeah. Okay. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale, take a big step out to the right, 4 to 5 feet. Now we're entering warrior two. On the right heel, pivot the right toes, and as you exhale, bend the right knee. We've covered warrior two in flow. Any questions about it? Way to modify, the lead leg straightens more. Way to deepen, lead leg bends more. Deepest expression, 90-degree angle in that front knee. Right, everything else is basically mountain pose beyond the arms. That's the basic body position. Everyone cool with that? Questions? Cool. Bent knee triangle. We didn't cover that, did we? Okay. Bent knee triangle. We're going to start by shifting the gaze to the left, and as you exhale, tilt to the right.
Notice my palms flip forward as I transition into this, right? So I'm not staying here, and they're not actually spinning up. You see or hear that cue. Spin your palms up and tilt. They're actually spinning forward, and as we tilt, right? You guys know this. Practice all the time.
The way to modify it is to place the forearm on top of the thigh. So what you remember we talked about the long bone principle, stacking the bones so that it requires less effort. Look what's happening now. We're stacking this bone on top of these bones and down to the foot. So it makes it nice because you now have a nice support beam, a column to support your hips and your legs for beginners who need that support.
It takes less effort for me to hold this, right?
What's also nice about the modification is the basic body position is to maintain nice parallel lines with the side bodies, right? And so what'll happen for most people if they go straight down, what is this? Once they meet inflexibility here, what happens is this lateral flexion here, a big rounding. It could be a function of one of two things. One, just I'm not sure what I'm doing. Two, as the hips drop down, if they reach immobility here, but they try to get their hand lower, their elbow down more towards the knee, the spine has to do the movement. Sorry. The spine has to do the movement. So the idea is keep this happening, ribs in, low belly in, side bodies lengthen as parallel as possible, and to deepen, the hips drop down. What may happen as the hips drop down is this knee is bending more. So again, the deepest expression is 90-degree angle in this knee. This hand will never touch. This is a very muscular experience. You know, like the ones in extended side angle where we do this or do this, right? Very similar in that the final expression of this isn't the hand touching, it's staying hovered, and the elbow and the knee staying pretty much connected together. Come back and go to the other side for me. So modification, forearm on top of the knee. To deepen, the arm extends down. And literally, like, so what happened is nothing, right? He just went from here to just weighting to unweighting. And that's the next level. Then it's just a matter of how deep to work the hips, with the deepest expression being this 90-degree angle in the front knee.
And if I want to take it even deeper from there, once my thighs parallel to the floor, I can lower my upper body closer to the thigh. You guys see that? Not rounding it, parallel lines as I take my upper body a little deeper. Hand never touches. You see that right hand doesn't touch.
Bending the front knee, yeah.
Bending the knee deeper, but there's two. So like, switch sides, so die. So I can be here, you guys see that, and get my thigh parallel to the floor, right? I can also deepen, so that's one way of deepening, thigh parallel to the floor. I can also deepen by taking my upper body, keeping the parallel lines, and lowering that towards the thigh. You guys see that? So it just takes my body more forward, carrying more weight, makes it more intense.
So
hand never touches, right? This left hand's not touching at all.
He shortened the angle or lessened the angle here. Come up, come up, come up. See that? And then lowers. That happens by lowering the upper torso while keeping the parallel lines and bending more into that knee.
So I can do one or the other, right? I could keep this a little higher and lower the body a little bit, or I could keep this higher, lower the thigh a little bit, or I could do both. You see that?
Standing hip opening, hip strengthening pose.
So in class, they really feel like often many people are grounded. You know, I know so how do you help them?
Cue and side bodies long. Touching is really a fast, easy way to do it, but
the other really quick and effective way is if you see it, and two things. One, if everyone go and do whatever side, you can go over and just be the demo, be the model of it, and be like, okay, so here, check this out. Like if you're here, try to go here, and that's what you want. Or if it's rampant, everyone is just like way off. Like everyone stop for a second and just check this out. You're all here. I need you to be here. That's the idea. And take a minute to break it down.
A breakout moment is what it's called. You stop everybody. Hey, watch me. Check this out. This is what I'm seeing. That's what I want you to do. And it'll clear it up pretty quick.
In the beginning, when you're just getting your feet wet with teaching, easiest way is just to go over and do the demo thing.
6 feet apart, of course.
So how come like that to me it looks just like extended side angle. So how do you make that difference between, because I feel like people would probably get there. So how do you...
So two things, extended side angle, the hand is down. So the right hand is touching, unless you're moving into like a variation where it's not, but the hand is touching and the left arm is sweeping up and over the head. So bent knee triangle, more muscular experience.
Deepest expression, hand stays up.
Extended side angle would be this.
Isn't the other cue that if I was here that in more in this
Bent knee triangle.
Your elbow is not right?
It's not necessary. It comes back to proportion. Some people may have a longer torso, shorter arms, shorter torso. So it's one of those blanket statements of like, it's helpful for people that are going to the floor and doing extended side angle, thinking that they're doing, they practice another style and think that's the same pose. And so you can say that cue to get people there, but you don't want it to be a cue that it's the telephone game. You don't want it to be a cue that all of a sudden, like, oh, well, you can't get the elbow lower. Yeah, proportionally, it could be that if they want to take a deeper expression that it does go lower. I'm not sure if it's the case with me, but yeah, like for me, I could go here and my elbow's a little bit lower than my knee and I'm still doing the pose, right? I'm still in good alignment with it, right? So it's not always the case depending on someone's proportion.
your palm is this way versus extended side down.
Mhm.
Because I used to like literally in flow, I'd be like, I'm doing triangle, and then I realized that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's the upper arm position is difference too. Yeah, for sure. There's something else I was going to add to that. I guess that's it.
So you do the right. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Well, in this part of the binder where it says warrior two and triangle right, that's the triangle.
Yes.
Do we ever do straight leg triangle in this?
Not on this side. Cool. All right. So you do right side, you do left side, and then after the left side, you come back up, straighten the leg. Which way are we going? Left. Left foot steps to right, arms overhead. Exhale, arms relaxed by your sides. Awesome. Now we're going to do standing separate leg twist. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale, big step out to the left. Yeah, it's okay. It's hard. It should be right in your in your sequence in the script. It should be right. Hopefully, take an inhale as you exhale. Hinge forward. In these, because we kind of do a lot of this. I say a lot. It's 2 or 3 different places. When you're descending, it's always a good idea to give the option to bend the knees and always make sure their core is sealed. And the descent and when they're coming up, you just want to make sure the back body is as supported as possible. What does bending the knees do? Breaks the superficial back line, which releases pressure off the low back, right? And then sealing the core is the other way of just supporting the back body. Cool? So now he's in this fold. Feet are parallel to each other. The left hand grounds down. Either you can do it underneath the shoulder or slightly like more towards the spine line, the heart center. The heart center, because it's over here, and it's just a couple inches, but it does matter, may give you more leverage to create that rotation. Subtle, but it does happen. Again, hips level to the floor, right shoulder stacks. That's the pose. The way you say that is that's also modification as well. So just hold here. If your shoulders are pretty well stacked, then the right arm can sweep high. The effort that's really challenging is to keep the hips as level to the floor as possible while stacking the shoulders. Remember when we were talking about it in flow, all twists is just manipulating the orientation of hips to shoulders, right? So in this one, hips stay level and we're working the shoulders stacking. Is it like once you get to a point, and this is what ends up happening, if this is his depth of twist, he feels like he's going way deeper as he lets that hip lift. But if I were to have these angles set and he drops the hips down, nothing really changed, right? It just feels like it. The reason and there's nothing honestly wrong with that. We don't teach that because it builds it's harder, which means it's more challenging and you get more out of trying to coordinate muscularly the hips staying level as the shoulders stack, right? You have to fire up the back line. You got to fire up the front line. The other one, you don't need as much muscular engagement to stabilize one and rotate the other at the same time. Does that make sense? That's why my point is you always hear us say, keep the hips level, stack the shoulders, or keep the shoulders level, stack the hips when you're doing twists. And it's because of the result that happens from the challenge that we're putting you in. It's not wrong to say, go ahead and let that right hip stack way, way up and let the right shoulder. It just, what is it? The difference is it creates a more organic experience.
But there's not really any depth of twist though. Like is exactly what Chris was saying. If you see the planes of the shoulders and the planes of the hips, it hasn't changed. Right? We've just shifted the body and the totality of the body. Right? So from here, right, my hips square to the floor, to here isn't any more depth of twist because my hips, the plane of my hips shifted also. You guys see that? Chris just showed that. I just want to highlight it again. Yeah.
And we like the challenge of trying to isolate one while rotating the other because of how fruitful it is for the mind-body connection, neurokinetic connection. Real quick, let me finish this and then any questions we have. So if you see a lot of your people with that hip way elevated, a nice trick is whatever hip is lifted, tell them to ground that same foot down. It's still counterintuitive. You'd think like, wait, if I'm grounding that down, wouldn't that lift it? And it's not the case. When you ground that foot down, it helps to drop that hip down to level the hips off. So whatever hip is lifted, ground that foot down. They won't know which hip is lifted. So, all right, ground your left foot down if they're twisting to the left, or ground your right foot down if they're twisting to the right. Cool. And then what's the deepest is just as much as they can rotate. Yeah.
So there is the weight in the toes, or you want it more in the heels?
Still towards the toes, and the reason is the same because there's for a lot of people, when their weight goes back to the heels, they tend to lock the knees out. Now you could argue that there's not a lot of weight bearing down. I mean, I'm not in a balancing pose where all my weight is pressured down on one foot, which means there's less pressure on the knees, but we like to hold to the guideline as much as possible, meaning distribute the weight toward the toes to make sure the shins and the thighs are there and active, so the knees are protected and not locked.
So what you want to look for specifically for that reason, because it can also easily be the telephone game again, if my hips are stacked over my ankles, obviously ankles over feet, and I'm in a good position, and I say, okay, now draw weight into the ball mounds of the feet, people could start doing this. What we're looking for, and this is what Chris just made this point, what we're looking for is hips back. You'll see that a lot in wide leg folds, is people will draw their hips back. You see my hips are more aligned here, I think, right? My knees are back, so I don't have that line anymore until I go here. Then I have the line again, right? So that's what we're looking for. And if I do that, my weight is in my heels. So if I bring the weight into the ball mounds of the feet, I can align my hips over my knees, over my ankles, and then have that as my foundation to work, whether it's a twist or whether it's standing sub leg stretching pose. So that's ideal. Corners of the feet. So if people are right on the alignments there, we want the corners of the feet, right? Big toe mound, little toe mound, both sides of the heels. But that cue can help if you start to see a lot of people here, or even if it's just one person, you go up and tell one person, I'll bring a little bit more weight into the ball mounds of the feet. You'll get them to align hips, knees, and ankles. That's the idea. Cool.
Means we're done. Questions anyone in Zoom? Everyone good? Yeah.
So you read my mind about the foot cue, but is there any additional cueing for like the stacking of the shoulders just to help with that?
To help stack them more, or to get them in the right position?
I guess.
On all twists, not all people, but on all twists, there's a tendency to collapse to the same side you're twisting on, to collapse that side body. So if I was twisting this way, there's a tendency for my right shoulder and my right hip to pull towards each other. So you can say in your twist, now lengthen the side bodies, or lengthen the right side, or draw the right hip back and the right shoulder forward. This is all twists, guys. You'll see that standing twists and twisting triangle, lunges, lunging twists, all twists. There's a tendency to shorten the same side you're twisting to. So the mountain pose cue, lengthen the side bodies, pull that into this in any of your twisting poses, and it's going to be fruitful. So it's draw the right on this side of it, draw the right hip back, the right shoulder forward, or lengthen the side body, or lengthen the right side body specifically.
Cool. Questions? Good to go? Okay, so pop up to the fingertips. So this is the cue out of it. Pop up to the fingertips. Feel free to bend the knees. Seal the core. Arms go wide. Exhale. As you inhale, come all the way up. Exhale at the top. With an inhale, which way are we going? Right foot steps to the left, arms overhead. Exhale, arms by your sides. You see how much easier this sequence is? It's why we start with the other one, because it's like right foot back. Am I in the house? Am I out of the house? Am I stepping the right foot in? Like, what's going on? This is like, oh, that's it. That was it. There we go. And now I'm here. Arms overhead, mountain pose. Right back, other side. That's why, like, once you've gotten that, and even the vinyasa class, step 1 and 2, this understanding is like, it's just easier. So we're at the pinnacle sequence for this step. Inhale, arms overhead. Palms come together, cross the thumbs, take a 3-foot step out to the right, weight into the heels, pivot both feet to the back of the mat. This is typically where I say, if you need to, you can widen the stance. The analogy we use is you want to be on mini train tracks, not a tightrope. It was traditionally taught as a tightrope, heels in line with each other. But when that happens, this hip naturally draws back more behind the other one. And then as you start to square the hips off, where you feel it most for most people is in that knee because it's that hip trying to draw forward.
It'd be akin to mountain pose like this, right? If I'm heel to heel aligned, as opposed to mountain pose like this, and then stepping to this position. So my hips are square. The long bone principle applies to my legs, right? It's a better foundation, right? Especially if I'm working a twist.
So then standing twist, which we've done, left arm forward, right arm back. Questions about this? Modification, hand to the hip if they need. A lot of times that's not so much a modification unless they have some type of shoulder issue, as much as it is like a self-detecting, self-correcting monitor of where that hip is going. And then the arm extends. Twisting triangle, we talked about this one. Right hand to the hip, left arm high. As you exhale, hinge forward. Any questions about this? I'm not going to go into the detail. You guys, we've done this. You guys have it in notes and all that. We're good? Cool. So the transition, palms come together, sweep high, then pivot once to the left and a second time. That's where you definitely want to say, make sure you readjust the feet so that you have better balance. We say, because the mountain pose is the paradigm, right? So basically, as much as possible, always you're going to be in some type of mountain pose position. So for us, having the heels in line with the sitting bones, even if the feet are straddling this way, is what we want. But if you have students who are less balanced, they can widen even more so they have a better base underneath them. There's nothing wrong with that. So standing twist, right arm forward, left arm back. Left hand to the hip, right arm high. You guys remember the hand that's in the back is always the hand that goes to the hip, just as a rule of thumb. Hinge forward, hand shin block foot or floor, left shoulder stacks. All the same principles apply with the hips, grounding the left foot, keep the hips level, shoulder stacks, arm extends. As you release, palms together, inhale, sweep all the way up. Weight into the heels, pivot once to the right. We did two poses. It's a little tricky to figure out which way we're going. Which way are we going? Right. Left foot steps to right. Exhale, arms by your sides. Step 2 complete. We then transition to step 3. This is typically where we take tap the water, wipe off, do your thing, and then we transition to the balancing sequence. Questions about that? You can see how it's, for beginners, this is the sequence. Like if someone's never done yoga before, having them be in a position that they're in all day, basically, not like a lot, like they're here, they're standing, they're not in mountain pose, but this is way more accessible to enter poses this way than it is to be in a position where they're trying to enter poses this way and sweep high. Like it's the accessibility of it is just way higher. That's why. As you may be asking, then why don't we start with that one? Because is that who we're going to go out and teach? For your understanding, the flow, like we did it the other way. I think we talked about this. It's like damn near impossible by this point in the training with all the other information that you've gotten to then be like, okay, we're going to talk about this house metaphor thing. Right foot back, right foot forward. You're in the house. You're out of the house. You're like, I'm not getting it. Yeah. Or you're fresh. That's when we want to cover that. So this is like, oh yeah, I got that. No problem.
Ask you the question.
It's been a while since I've taken one of these classes. Are you holding each pose about 3 to 5 breaths? Or?
Five breaths. Yeah. So all poses we always hold poses about 5 breaths, which translates to about 45 to 90 seconds. So it's a rough guideline. You'll get people in, you'll get them into the pose, basic body position, how to deepen, modifications, how to deepen, what's the deepest, and then vertical stabilization or breath cue or muscular organic energy cue, and then a countdown and then out. And that's almost always around that time. And then I say 45 to 90 breaths because it depends on the pose. Like if I'm in a wide leg twist, I can do 90 seconds all day long. It'll be fine. If I'm in breath wise, right? Because 5 breaths could be, or 5 breaths could be, depending if I'm in balancing staff, in an intense part of class. So it really depends on the intensity, the pose, the effort. So a rough guideline is basic body positions, modification, how to deepen, deepest, or the basic, how do we cue a pose, and then give them another cue of vertical stabilization or muscular organic energy, and then give them a finish. A finish is a countdown, last breath, a little more at the end, however you want to wrap up the pose, so they know we're about to be done. And that's usually about 5 breaths. Any other questions?
All right, take a quick 2-minute break. Stand up, move around a little bit, get your bodies moving. Or sleep.
Or stay resting.
What do you think? It's about 10 to 11.
So one of two things. Let me
Pause this. Hold on.